And we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and whether I think they are legit or not. They've gotten off to a good start. I think they have definitely surprised a lot of people. I think many people thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Obviously, the offseason, Tom Brady retired, so he's no longer there. So they went in and, they brought in Baker Mayfield, who bounced around a little bit. Well, has bounced around the last couple of years. I mean, he was on the Browns and went to the Panthers, and then they got rid of him, and then the Rams signed him because of all their injuries with Stafford getting hurt. And now he's on the Bucs. And, again, people just didn't think the Bucs were going to be that good. And listen, I mean, they're 3-1 right now, and anything can happen. But right now, I mean, I think the Bucs are legit. Now, that doesn't mean that I think they're like a Super Bowl contender or anything like that. But I definitely think they could be a team that makes the playoffs. Maybe win a playoff game at home, depending on who they play. I mean, the wins, I think their most impressive win was against the Saints in New Orleans. Because I had the Saints winning that game. I really thought that, I thought it was going to be low scoring, and I thought the Saints would take that. But, Baker Mayfield threw 3 touchdowns in that game. The first week of the year in Minnesota, you would think the Vikings were going to win that. But, Baker played okay in that game. He only threw for 173 and 2 touchdowns. One of them was to Mike Evans. The other was to Trey Palmer. Then they won 27-17 over the Bears. But, the way the Bears have been, other than last week, it wasn't I think, like I said, the most impressive win for me was against the Saints. 26-9, Baker threw for 246, 3 touchdowns and a pick. And, they got a lot of those guys. They still got some guys from their Super Bowl, their Super Bowl run. Shaq Barrett's back, so that's big for them. Levante David is still there. So, the team is still, and you still got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on offense. So, but I just wanted to pull up the graphic that I have for today. And unfortunately, I cut off Baker's face because I'm using StatMuse again. StatMuse has become my best friend now. So this is Baker through the first 4 games of the season. He's got a 101.5 passer rating, 882 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, which is really good. Touchdown interception ratio is great. Now again, it's a small sample size, and obviously it could be completely different by the end of the year. Well, it's going to be completely different by the end of the year. But listen, for Baker, I hope he does well. I'm a Baker Mayfield fan. I would say I am. I would say he's one of my favorite players in the league, I would say. And you're probably asking why. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like for some players, for me, it's just kind of like, yeah, I like this guy. Let's see what he can do. But yeah, I've been a fan of his, and I've kind of and listen, I'm not like a Baker Mayfield apologist. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say he's the greatest thing ever, and but I just feel like he dealt with some adversity. The situation in Cleveland. He hurt his shoulder, and in 2021, and this is after they made the playoffs in 2020 when the Browns were a playoff team and they won a playoff game in Pittsburgh. I know it was in front of no fans, but hey, it's still happened, and they almost beat the Chiefs. But, he gets hurt. Browns don't make the playoffs, and then they go out and they trade for Deshaun Watson. They toss Baker aside. And honestly, Deshaun Watson doesn't look that good. So, and then Baker goes to the Panthers and really doesn't play that well. Goes to the Rams and he wins that game, where he had to learn the playbook in like 2 days, and they beat the Raiders. And then the Bucs sign him, and you know what? He looks good. Again, they lost to the Eagles, but you know what? I think he's definitely looked good. And when you got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin now to throw the ball to, I mean, last year he wasn't throwing to Cooper Kupp on the Rams. I mean, he was throwing to Ben Skoranek and Van Jefferson. Now he's throwing to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So, and the Bucs, they got a tough game against the Lions this weekend at home. You know what? I think they can win that game. I don't know if they will, but I think that's a winnable game. Then they play the Falcons at home in Week 7. I think that's a winnable game. The Falcons are not a good road team. Then at Buffalo, Week 8, that's going to be tough. So I don't know if they're going to win that. But then you got the Texans and the Titans. Those are both winnable games. At 49ers, that's going to be tough. We saw what they did to Brady last year, 35-7. Might see something similar to that. But then you got the Colts, the Panthers, the Falcons, the Packers, the Jags, the Saints at home, and then at Panthers. I mean, their schedule is favorable. Their schedule is definitely favorable. I really think that it's going to be between them and the Saints for the division. But you got to like that schedule. And I think they could maybe win 9-10 games, get into the playoffs, because that might be what it takes to win this division. And you know what? Maybe they win a playoff game. Now, again, I'm not saying that, they're going to go on the Super Bowl run. I don't see that. But I think the Bucs are legit, because if their defense is playing well and Baker, limits the turnovers, which, I mean, two interceptions in 4 games. I mean, for him, it's, that's good. Like I said before, the touchdown to interception ratio has been good. I think this Bucs team can, be a playoff contender. Not a Super Bowl contender, but a playoff contender. I don't think this is a phony team. I mean, I don't think they stack up well against the 49ers. We saw how they played against the Eagles. And the Lions are better. But you know what? I think they can beat the Lions. And it's at home. So, they're, and again, it's all, also the other thing too is the status of Mike Evans. I mean, he didn't practice again like I talked about in the last segment. But I don't know. I think I think that's a winnable game. So, and listen, they already beat the Saints. So, that's good, getting that divisional win. They haven't played the Falcons yet, but I think they're better than the Falcons. I like Baker over Desmond Ridder. The Falcons, I mean, I just right now they're 3-0 at home, but not a good road team so far. 3-0 at home and 0-2 on the road. But I think the Bucs are better than them. I do, and the Bucs are better than the Panthers too. I mean, the Panthers right now, they're one of the worst teams in football. So, and it's a weak division. It's a weak division. I mean, the Saints offensively, they're still trying to work through some things. I mean, the offense still isn't great. They won 34-0 against the Patriots, but look at how the Patriots are. So, right now, I like the Bucs to win the division, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, Baker's playing really well. I mean, listen, if he's got protection, he's got the weapons, I mean, he could do well. I mean, he did well with the Browns when, they had their good offensive line and the good running game with Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and weapons to throw to. So, and listen, I don't know if Baker's going to, I don't think Baker's the elite of the elite. He's not. But you know what? I think if you give him the right supporting cast around him, he could take you to the playoffs. And he won a playoff game. And I think many people forget about that. Then he goes to the Panthers. I mean, you got Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore, but, still, you're not. Matt Rule was the head coach. And then they got rid of him. He goes to the Rams with McVay, but, the Rams were dealing with a ton of injuries themselves. He did play well. Now we got another shot with the Bucs, and they're in first place. So, but again, I don't think Baker is like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But you know what? I think there needs to be more respect to his name and how he's been playing this year. And he could be leading a team like the Bucs to, right now they're in first place, and he could maybe get them to the playoffs, and we'll see what happens. Now, I don't really expect them to do much again because, I mean, the 49ers are the class of the NFC right now. They're the best team. And the Eagles beat the Bucs. Um, you know, Baker had his worst game of the season. But again, it's expected. The Eagles are one of the best teams as well. But let's see how they stack up against the Lions. Because I view the Lions right now as the third best team in the NFC. So maybe see how you do against them. I mean, the Bucs already beat the Saints, so right now I put them ahead of the Saints. But yeah, let's see how this game goes on Sunday. I think it should be a very exciting game. I hope Mike Evans plays, so they got their full supporting cast. I mean, they got some young receivers that Baker's building a rapport with. You got Rashad White, who's a good running back. Home game. I mean, we'll see. I think the Bucs could definitely win. And if not, I think they could keep it close. But, we'll see. But I think, for now, let's give Baker Mayfield some respect. Now, things can change, of course. We get to the end of the year and the Bucs just, collapse and, end up having one of the worst records in football. Then we come back and we have a different conversation. But I think for right now, 3-1, they got a favorable schedule. I think this team can be a playoff team. I think it definitely can. And again, I'm rooting for Baker. I want him to do well because, I mean, what happened over in Cleveland was unfortunate. And you know what? I think he got humbled from this whole situation because I know a lot of people questioned his attitude and things like that. And, obviously he got made fun of for being in all those commercials. But you know what? I think all this kind of changed him as a person. I mean, you could kind of see it, in some of his interviews. And, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But, I'm rooting for him, and I hope he does well. And I hope he leads the Bucs to the playoffs. I really do. So yeah, that's basically it when we're talking about the Buccaneers. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the Buccaneers have are a playoff team? Do you think that they're a phony and that they're going to end up flaming out and missing the playoffs? But I went through their schedule, and listen, there is a lot of winnable games on their schedule, which I think they could definitely get to 9 to 10 wins if they keep playing the way they are. I mean, and look at what Mike Evans is doing with Baker. I mean, last year, obviously, there was a lot of stuff going on in Tampa. The offensive line wasn't very good last year, so Brady was checking it down a gazillion times. But, Mike Evans is looking like he's going to have a bounce-back season. He didn't have a ton of touchdowns last year. So I listen. I think the Bucs could be a playoff team this year with a better record than they did finish with last year. Because last year they finished 8-9 and won the division. The most important thing is right now it's a weak division. It still is a weak division. I don't trust the Saints. Falcons I don't really trust either. And the Panthers obviously are 0-5. So, but again, that remains to be seen. But so that's it when it comes to talking about the Buccaneers. So in the next part of the show, the final part of the show, we'll get into the Broncos and the Chiefs game for tonight. But again, I just want to remind you guys to donate or tip and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, and for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. So we're going to take our final break of the show, and then when we come back, we will preview the game for tonight, and then that will basically be it for today's show. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.